I am Amelia, 27 years old, and I woke up in a hospital after everyone thought I died. My own parents identified a mangled body as mine just to claim my $500,000 life insurance. I overheard my mother laughing in the hallway outside my room, saying, "Your daughter is worth more dead than alive." My father coldly responded, "We did not need you. We needed the money." The ultimate betrayal came from the two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. If you are watching this from somewhere safe, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to hear how I confronted my parents at my own funeral with police by my side. Before the crash that supposedly killed me, I had built a successful life for myself in New York City. After graduating with honors in finance from NYU, I landed a job at one of the top investment firms in Manhattan. By 27, I was already making six figures, had my own apartment in Brooklyn, and was steadily climbing the corporate ladder. To anyone looking from the outside, my life seemed perfect. But behind closed doors, my relationship with my parents had always been strained. Growing up in a middle-class suburb of Boston, I never felt the warmth and love that other children experienced. My parents, Diane and Robert, viewed me more as an investment or a burden rather than a daughter. "We sacrificed everything for you" was their constant refrain, even when I was just asking for basic necessities. When I was 12, my father lost his job at an accounting firm and began drinking heavily. My mother picked up extra shifts as a nurse, but the financial strain took a toll on our family. I started working part-time jobs at 14, saving every penny for college, because I knew they would not help me. While other parents proudly displayed their children's achievements, mine only saw dollar signs. "When are you going to start paying us back for raising you?" my mother asked, on my 18th birthday, just as I was opening my acceptance letter to NYU. There was no celebration, just calculations of how much I would owe them once I graduated. Throughout college, I worked multiple jobs while maintaining a full scholarship. I barely slept 4 hours a night for 4 years straight. Despite my parents contributing nothing to my education, they showed up at my graduation with hands outstretched. "Now that you will be making real money, you can finally help your family," my father said instead of congratulating me. After securing my job in New York, the financial demands escalated. First, it was for utility bills, then for medical expenses, then to cover my father's gambling debts. Each time I transferred money, the gratitude lasted less than a day before they needed more. My best friend Cassandra repeatedly warned me, "Amelia, they are using you as their personal ATM. There is no end to this." My boyfriend Michael was even more direct. "They do not love you. They love what you can give them," he said, after witnessing my mother berate me for not sending enough money for a luxury cruise they wanted to take. Despite these warnings, I could not break free from the obligation I felt. They were my parents, after all. In a desperate attempt to secure some peace and provide a safety net for them, I purchased a $500,000 life insurance policy when I was 25, naming them as beneficiaries. "See, even if something happens to me, you will be taken care of," I told them, hoping this would finally make them feel secure. It did not. The demands continued, growing more insistent with each promotion I received. When I was made junior partner last year, my father called not to congratulate me, but to ask if I could now afford to pay off their mortgage. When I hesitated, he accused me of being selfish. "After all, we have done for you. This is how you repay us." Michael urged me to cut ties. "They will drain you until there is nothing left," he warned. We had been dating for 2 years, and he had seen firsthand the emotional toll my parents took on me. We had plans to move in together, maybe even get engaged soon. He represented everything my relationship with my parents was not: supportive, loving, and genuine. The final argument came 3 months ago. I had driven to Boston for what I thought would be a nice weekend visit. Instead, I walked into an ambush. My parents had medical bills, credit card debt, and a second mortgage I knew nothing about. They expected me to solve all their problems with my fancy New York money. "You owe us this," my mother insisted. "We gave you life." "I have already given you over $70,000 in the past 5 years," I countered, finally standing my ground. "I cannot keep doing this." My father's face turned crimson with rage. "Then what good are you to us? The only thing you have ever been good for is making money." Those words cut deeper than any knife. I left their house in tears, driving back toward New York in a torrential downpour, my vision blurred as much by my tears as by the rain lashing against my windshield. Little did I know that this drive would change everything, and that the next time my parents spoke about me, they would be planning to profit from my death. The rain was coming down in sheets as I navigated the slick highway back to New York. My phone kept buzzing with angry texts from my parents, each one more accusatory than the last. I should have pulled over, should have waited for the storm to pass, but I just wanted to get as far away from Boston as possible. I remember the moment with perfect clarity. A truck ahead of me hydroplaned, jackknifing across 3 lanes. I slammed on my brakes, but my car skidded on the wet asphalt. The guardrail came rushing toward me at frightening speed. There was the deafening crunch of metal, the bizarre sensation of my car rolling down an embankment, the airbag deploying with explosive force. Then darkness. My next memory is fragmented. Voices shouting, rain on my face, the metallic taste of blood in my mouth, sirens wailing, someone saying, "She is still breathing." Hurry then, nothing again for what I later learned was 2 days. I awoke to the steady beeping of hospital monitors. Every inch of my body throbbed with pain. My left arm was in a cast, bandages wrapped around my torso, and my face felt swollen and tender. The simple act of opening my eyes required monumental effort. A nurse with kind eyes and auburn hair was checking my IV when she noticed I was awake. Her mouth fell open in shock, and she dropped her clipboard with a clatter. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You are alive." Her reaction confused me. Of course I was alive. Injured badly, yes, but obviously breathing. "I will get the doctor right away," she said, rushing from the room. The doctor, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and a serious expression, entered minutes later. She studied me with a mixture of disbelief and concern. "Miss Walker," she said slowly, "you were in a serious accident 2 days ago. You suffered multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and a severe concussion. But your condition has stabilized, and with time, you should recover fully." I tried to speak, but my throat was parched. The nurse, who introduced herself as Rachel, helped me sip water through a straw. "My parents," I managed to croak. "Have they been notified?" The doctor and Rachel exchanged an uncomfortable glance. "Your parents were notified of the accident immediately," the doctor said carefully. "They came to the hospital the night you were brought in." Something in her tone made my skin prickle with unease. "I need to tell you something unusual," she continued. "According to our records and the official documentation, you were pronounced dead at the scene." I stared at her, certain I had misheard. "What?" "Your parents identified a body from your accident as you. Death certificate was issued. Legally, Amelia Walker is deceased." My mind reeled, unable to process what she was saying. How could I be dead when I was clearly lying here alive? Rachel explained that there had been multiple vehicles involved in the pileup caused by the jackknife truck. One of the other victims, a woman approximately my age and build, had been burned beyond recognition. My purse and identification had somehow ended up near her body. "Your parents identified the body without hesitation," Rachel said softly. "They claimed they recognized your birthmark, your jewelry." I shook my head in disbelief. I had a small crescent-shaped birthmark on my shoulder, but it was not particularly distinctive, and the only jewelry I wore was a simple silver bracelet Michael had given me. That night, as I drifted in and out of a painkiller-induced haze, I overheard voices outside my room. Familiar voices that sent a chill down my spine despite my medicated state. "The insurance company already approved the claim," my mother was saying excitedly. $500,000, Robert. Can you believe it? All our problems solved in one fell swoop." "Keep your voice down," my father responded. "We need to get the body released for burial as soon as possible. The sooner we close this chapter, the better." "Do you think anyone will ask questions, that boyfriend of hers?" "Michael. He is too broken up to think straight. Besides, the police confirmed the identity. As far as the world is concerned, our daughter died in that crash." There was a pause, and then my mother said something that would forever change how I viewed them. "You know, it is almost poetic. Her life is worth more to us dead than it ever was when she was alive." My father chuckled. "We did not need her. We needed the money. And now we have it." Tears streamed down my face as I lay there, unable to move, unable to confront them. The two people who had given me life were celebrating my death, seeing it as nothing more than a financial windfall. The pain of their betrayal eclipsed the physical agony of my injuries. In that moment, something inside me hardened. I would not confront them yet. First, I would understand exactly what they had done. Rachel returned to check on me and found me silently weeping. When I told her what I had overheard, her face paled. "That is the most evil thing I have ever heard," she whispered. "What are you going to do?" "For now, nothing," I replied, a plan already forming in my mind. "As far as my parents are concerned, I really did die in that crash, and I need your help to keep it that way a little longer." The next morning, Rachel smuggled a laptop into my room. With shaking hands, I Googled my own name. There, it was splashed across local news sites: investment banker Amelia Walker, 27 killed in highway pileup. There were quotes from my parents describing their devastating loss and what a wonderful daughter I had been. My father even shed tears for the camera, saying, "She was our whole world." The hypocrisy made me physically ill. I had to run to the bathroom to throw up. Rachel became my ally. She arranged to have me moved to a private room under a Jane Doe designation, telling hospital administration that I was an amnesia patient while they sorted out my identity. It bought me time to think to plan. My first move was contacting Michael. I called him from Rachel's personal phone, bracing myself for his reaction. "Hello," his voice sounded hollow, grief-stricken. "Michael, it is me, Amelia." Silence, then a sharp intake of breath. "This is not funny. Whoever this is a sick joke." "It is not a joke. I am alive. I am in St. Elizabeth's Hospital, my parents. They identified someone else's body as mine. For the insurance money." He hung up. I called back. He hung up again. On the third try, I said, "Remember when we went to Cape Cod last summer and you lost your wallet in the sand? I found it buried next to that ugly purple starfish, and you said it was a sign we were meant to find treasures together." This time the silence was different. "Amelia." His voice cracked. "How is this possible?" "I need you to come to the hospital. Use the staff entrance on the east side. Ask for Nurse Rachel Conway. Do not tell anyone else I am alive. Not yet." 3 hours later, Michael burst into my room, his face a mixture of shock, joy, and confusion. He embraced me gently, mindful of my injuries, tears streaming down his face. "I was at your parents' house yesterday," he said, still holding my hand as if afraid I might disappear. "They were planning your funeral. Your mother was crying over photo albums. Your father was talking to the insurance company. It was all an act." I nodded grimly. "They think I am dead. They identified some poor woman's body as mine to collect on my life insurance policy." Michael paced the room, running his hands through his hair. "This is criminal. This is fraud, identity theft. I do not even know what else. We need to go to the police." "Not yet," I replied. "First, I need to understand exactly what happened. Who really died in that crash? How did my ID end up with her? Did my parents somehow plan this, or did they just take advantage of a terrible coincidence?" Together, Michael and I began piecing together what had happened. He used his connections as a paralegal at a law firm to access accident reports. I had Rachel discreetly ask questions among the hospital staff who had been present when my parents identified the body. What emerged was disturbing. The woman who died was likely a homeless person who had been hitchhiking. The truck driver who picked her up was also killed in the crash. My purse had been thrown from my car during the rollover landing near their vehicle. When emergency services arrived, they naturally assumed the woman's body belonged with the nearby identification. But that still did not explain why my parents so readily identified a stranger as their daughter. The body had been burned beyond recognition. Any parent would have asked questions, demanded DNA tests, held out hope. Unless they wanted me dead. A week after the accident, I was well enough to be discharged. Michael arranged for me to stay at his friend's vacant apartment. By then, my funeral was scheduled for the following week. It was time to involve the authorities. Michael contacted his former college roommate, who is now a detective with the New York Police Department. Detective James Harper agreed to meet us at the apartment. Detective Harper was skeptical at first, assuming I was perpetrating some kind of insurance fraud myself. But as we laid out the evidence, including hospital records proving I was the real Amelia Walker and recordings I had made of my parents discussing their windfall, His expression grew increasingly grave. "I need to bring in someone from major crimes," he said finally. "This goes beyond my jurisdiction." The next day, we met with Detective Diana Rivera from the Financial Crimes Division. She was a sharp-eyed woman with a no-nonsense demeanor. "What your parents have done is multiple felonies," she explained after reviewing our evidence. "Insurance fraud filing, false police reports, improper disposal of human remains, identity theft, potentially even conspiracy, if we can prove they planned this before the accident." "What about the woman who really died?" I asked. "Does anyone know who she was?" Detective Rivera shook her head. "So far, no one has come forward to report her missing. We are running her DNA and fingerprints through the system, but if she was living on the streets, she might not be in any database." That broke my heart all over again. Not only had my parents betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible, but they had also robbed another human being of her identity and proper burial. "Here is what we will do," Detective Rivera said, laying out a plan. "We will continue building the case quietly until the funeral. That is when we will make the arrest with maximum evidence in hand. In the meantime, Miss Walker, you need to stay dead a little longer." I agreed, though. The emotional toll of watching my own life being eulogized on social media was almost unbearable. Friends posted heartfelt tributes. Colleagues organized a memorial at work. And through it all, my parents played the role of grieving parents, perfectly accepting condolences and casseroles with practiced grace. Michael kept me updated on their activities. "They put your condo on the market," he reported one evening, "and your mother was shopping for a Mercedes yesterday. They were not even waiting for my body to be buried before spending their windfall." Every new detail hardened my resolve. I was no longer just seeking justice. I was reclaiming my existence from the people who had tried to erase it for profit. As the investigation progressed, Detective Rivera uncovered layers of deception that shocked even my jaded perception of my parents. Bank records revealed they were not just in ordinary debt. They owed over $300,000 to loan sharks connected to underground gambling rings. My father's occasional poker games were actually a full-blown gambling addiction that had spiraled out of control over the past decade. "These are dangerous people they are involved with," Detective Rivera warned during one of our meetings. "They have been known to resort to violence when payments are missed. Your parents were likely desperate." That explained the urgency, but not the callousness with which they celebrated my supposed death. No amount of debt justified that. Michael continued digging into my family's past, looking for anything that might help build the case. What he found left me questioning everything I thought I knew about my childhood. "Amelia," he said one evening, his voice unusually somber as he entered the apartment with a folder. "I found something you need to see." Inside was a birth certificate. Not mine, but for a girl named Abigail Walker, born 2 years before me to the same parents. "I do not understand," I said, staring at the document. "I do not have a sister." "You did," Michael said quietly. "I found death records, too. She died when she was 5 years old. Car accident." My hands trembled as I processed this information. They never told me. Not once in 27 years did they mention I had a sister. "There is more," Michael continued reluctantly. "There was an insurance policy on Abigail, too, $25,000. Not much by today's standards, but a considerable sum in the early 90s. The implication hung in the air between us. Had my parents done this before? Had they somehow been involved in my sister's death as well? I felt physically ill at the thought. "We need to talk to someone who knew them back then," I insisted. "Someone who might remember what really happened with Abigail." Through social media, Michael tracked down my mother's former best friend, a woman named Judith who now lived in Florida. I called her claiming to be a journalist researching unusual insurance claims and asked about the Walkers and their daughter's tragic accident. Judith was initially reluctant to speak, but eventually opened up. It was the strangest thing she said. Diane and Robert were having money problems, fighting all the time. Then suddenly little Abigail has this terrible accident. Nobody witnessed it except Robert, who said she ran into the street after a ball. "Did people believe him?" I asked, my heart pounding. Judith paused. "Most did, but I always wondered. Robert had taken out that insurance policy just 3 months before, and they moved away right after collecting it, cut ties with everyone who knew them. Started fresh in Boston with their new baby, the one they had right after Abigail died. That new baby was me. A replacement child they had conceived even as they were possibly planning the death of their firstborn. The revelation left me reeling. When I shared this with Detective Rivera, she immediately broadened the investigation to include a review of Abigail's death. The statute of limitations may have expired on any crimes related to your sister, she warned, but it establishes a pattern that strengthens our current case. As the pieces came together, I began having nightmares about a little girl I had never known, a sister whose existence had been erased just as mine nearly was. Had I been nothing but a financial backup plan to my parents all along? Was that why they never showed me genuine love? Michael found me crying one night, clutching the few childhood photos I had saved on my phone. I always thought I was doing something wrong, I sobbed. That if I just achieved more, earned more, gave them more, they would finally love me. But they were never capable of love, were they? He held me as I grieved, not just for myself, but for the sister I never knew and the normal family I never had. Meanwhile, Detective Rivera made another disturbing discovery. My parents had researched how to tamper with car brakes on their home computer just weeks before my accident. The searches had been deleted but were recovered by forensic technicians. "We cannot prove they actually sabotaged your car," Rivera explained. "It was too damaged in the crash. But the intent is clear." This was no longer just about insurance fraud. My parents had likely attempted to murder me. The realization should have terrified me, but instead it filled me with cold determination. They had taken everything from me, including my trust in the most fundamental relationship a person can have. They would not take my future, too. As my funeral approached, we finalized our plan. Detective Rivera would attend as an undercover mourner. Michael would be there openly playing the role of grieving boyfriend. And I would wait for the perfect moment to reveal that their perfect crime was anything but. The night before the funeral, I stood before the mirror in Michael's friend's apartment, barely recognizing the person staring back at me. My face was still bruised, my arm in a cast, but the physical injuries paled in comparison to the emotional transformation I had undergone. The trusting daughter who had desperately sought parental approval was gone. In her place stood a woman determined to reclaim her life and ensure justice was served, not just for herself, but also for the nameless woman whose body had been used as a pawn, and for the sister whose life had possibly been sacrificed for financial gain decades earlier. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Michael asked, coming to stand behind me. "We could let the police handle the arrest without you being there." I met his gaze in the mirror. I need to see their faces when they realize their plan failed. I need them to know that I know exactly what they did. And most importantly, I need to speak for the woman they buried in my place, and for Abigail, who never got justice. Tomorrow, Amelia Walker would rise from the dead, and my parents would finally face the consequences of their lifetime of calculated cruelty. The morning of my funeral dawned with appropriate gloom-gray clouds hanging low over the cemetery where my empty casket would be laid to rest. From a distance, Michael and I watched as people arrived. Friends from college, colleagues from work, even distant relatives who probably had not thought about me in years, all dressed in black and carrying solemn expressions. My parents stood at the entrance to the funeral home accepting condolences with practiced grief. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, while my father kept his arm protectively around her shoulders. They looked appropriately devastated, just as they had in the news interviews following my death. "I cannot believe how convincing they are," Michael whispered, as we observed from our car parked down the street. "They should have gone into acting instead of plotting murder." Detective Rivera was already inside, posing as a former college classmate. She had wired herself to record any incriminating statements my parents might make. 2 unmarked police cars with additional officers waited around the corner, ready to move in on her signal. The plan was for me to enter during the service after my parents had given their eulogies. I wanted to hear what lies they would tell about our relationship, what fiction they would create about their love for the daughter they had tried to erase. "Are you ready?" Michael asked as we watched the last of the mourners file into the building. I took a deep breath, adjusting the sling that held my still healing arm, as ready as I will ever be. We slipped into the back of the funeral home just as the service was beginning. I wore large sunglasses and a scarf that partially obscured my face, though the bruising itself was an effective disguise. No one would expect to see the guest of honor at her own funeral. The room was filled with flower arrangements and enlarged photos of me from various stages of life. A closed casket draped with white roses sat at the front, supposedly containing my remains. The thought of who actually lay inside a nameless woman nobody had claimed made my stomach clench with sadness and anger. The funeral director spoke, first offering generic platitudes about life and loss. Then my father approached the podium, his face a mask of sorrow. "My daughter was the light of our lives," he began, his voice cracking with what anyone else would interpret as emotion. "From the day she was born, we knew she was special." I dug my nails into my palm to keep from shouting out the truth, as he continued to describe a parent-child relationship that had never existed. He spoke of proud moments at my graduations, family vacations we had never taken, traditions we had never shared. Even as her career took off, she always made time for her mother and me. Always so generous, always thinking of others. That part at least contained a grain of truth. I had been generous, sending them money whenever they asked, believing that someday it would be enough to earn their love. My mother spoke next, weaving an equally fictional tale of maternal devotion. "A mother should never have to bury her child," she sobbed. "Amelia had so much life ahead of her, so much left to give." So much money left to give was what she really meant. I felt Michael's hand tighten around mine as we both restrained ourselves from interrupting. After a few more speakers, including a shocked-looking Michael, who somehow managed to deliver a brief, honest tribute to our relationship, while maintaining our ruse, the funeral director announced that there would be a brief video tribute before proceeding to the cemetery for interment. "This is it," I whispered to Michael. "Once the video starts, Detective Rivera will signal the other officers." As the lights dimmed and the first notes of what was apparently my favorite song, "It Was Not," began to play over a montage of photos, I saw Detective Rivera slip out a side door. Moments later, she returned with 4 uniformed officers who positioned themselves at the room's exits. She approached the audio-visual controls and cut the music mid-song. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd as the lights came back up. "Ladies and gentlemen," Detective Rivera announced, holding up her badge. "I apologize for the interruption. I am Detective Diana Rivera with the NYPD Financial Crimes Division. I need to speak with Diane and Robert Walker immediately." My parents' faces registered confusion, then alarm. My father stepped forward, indignation replacing his grief. "What is the meaning of this? This is our daughter's funeral." "Is it?" Detective Rivera countered. "I have reason to believe the person you claim to be burying today is not your daughter at all." Gasps and whispers spread through the attendees. My mother clutched my father's arm, her face suddenly pale. "That is absurd," my father sputtered. "We identified her ourselves," asked the medical examiner. The medical examiner made a preliminary identification based on personal effects found at the scene, and your confirmation, Rivera replied calmly. "But we have new evidence that suggests a case of deliberate misidentification for the purpose of insurance fraud." My mother found her voice outrage coloring her tone. "How dare you? We are grieving parents. This is harassment." That was my cue. I stood up from my seat in the back row and removed my sunglasses and scarf. "Are you really grieving, Mom? Or are you calculating how quickly you can spend my insurance money?" The room went deadly silent. Every head turned toward me, expressions ranging from confusion to shock to dawning comprehension. My father's face drained of color. My mother's mouth opened and closed without sound, like a fish out of water. "Amelia," someone gasped. Then another voice and another as recognition spread through the room. I walked slowly toward the front, Michael at my side, and Detective Rivera moving to meet us halfway. "Surprise," I said, my voice carrying in the silent room. "I am not dead, though not for lack of trying on your part." My father was the first to recover, instantly shifting to damage control. "Amelia. Oh my God, it is a miracle, we thought," the police told us. "Save it," I cut him off. "I heard you both at the hospital. Her life is worth more to us dead than alive. We did not need her. We needed the money. Remember saying that while I was lying there supposedly dead?" My mother attempted a different approach, tears suddenly streaming down her face. "You must have been confused, sweetheart. The medication, the trauma, we would never say such things." Diane and Robert Walker, Detective Rivera, interrupted. "You are under arrest for insurance fraud, filing false reports, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit these crimes." We also have evidence suggesting you may have tampered with your daughter's vehicle before the accident, which could constitute attempted murder. The other officers moved in handcuffs ready. My father's face contorted with rage, his mask of loving parenthood completely abandoned. "You ungrateful bitch," he hissed at me. "After everything we have done for you." "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked, standing my ground as the officers restrained him. Besides trying to cash in on my death, besides hiding the fact that I had a sister named Abigail who died under suspicious circumstances when I was a baby, was her death convenient for your finances too? The mention of Abigail's name hit them like a physical blow. My mother's face went from tearful pleading to cold hatred in an instant. "You have no idea what you are talking about." "I know enough," I replied. "I know you never loved me. I was just a replacement for the daughter you lost, or maybe just an investment you planned to cash in on eventually." As the officers led them away, my father made one last desperate attempt. "It was her idea," he shouted, jerking his head toward my mother. "She said we could solve all our problems if we just got the insurance money." My mother's response was equally telling. "You were the one who researched how to tamper with the brakes. I just wanted to wait until she updated her policy to the full $1,000,000. Their mutual betrayal of each other was the final confirmation of their guilt. The assembled mourners watched in stunned silence as my parents were escorted out, still hurling accusations at each other. When they were gone, I turned to face the room full of shocked faces. Among them were people who genuinely cared about me, who had come to mourn a woman they thought had died too young. They deserved an explanation. "I am sorry for the deception," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I only learned recently what my parents had done. This funeral is for someone, though. A woman who died in the same accident I survived, whose body my parents claimed as mine. We do not know her name yet, but she deserves to be remembered too, not just used as a pawn in their scheme." The next hour was surreal. People embraced me, cried with relief, expressed outrage at my parents' actions. The funeral director stood awkwardly to the side, clearly unsure how to proceed with a funeral where the supposed deceased was very much alive. In the midst of the chaos, I approached the casket, placing my hand on its polished surface. "I will find out who you were," I promised quietly, "and I will make sure you get the respect you deserve." As we left the funeral home, reporters who had somehow gotten wind of the dramatic events were already gathering outside. Detective Rivera helped usher Michael and me to a waiting police car that would take us to the station to formalize my statement. "You did well in there," she said as we drove away. "It takes courage to confront betrayal like that, especially from parents." I looked back at the funeral home receding in the distance, at the life and identity that had nearly been stolen from me. "They stopped being my parents the moment they decided I was worth more dead than alive," I replied. "Now I need to figure out who I am without them." The days following my parents' arrest were a blur of legal meetings, media inquiries, and administrative nightmares. Legally resurrecting yourself is surprisingly complicated. My death certificate had to be invalidated, accounts unfrozen, government records corrected. Each step required extensive documentation and explanations that often left bureaucrats staring at me in disbelief. "So you are not dead," a bemused DMV employee said when I went to reinstate my driver's license. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated. I replied a line I found myself repeating frequently. The insurance company launched its own investigation, though they were relieved they had not actually paid out the $500,000, having been notified of the suspected fraud just in time. My employer welcomed me back with a combination of shock and sympathy, offering paid leave while I sorted out my life. Meanwhile, the media had a field day with the story. "Dead daughter returns parents arrested in insurance." Sheem screamed one headline. "Woman crashes her own funeral parents." Cuff declared another. I declined all interview requests, though the details leaked anyway from various sources connected to the case. Michael remained my rock throughout it all, letting me stay at his apartment while mine was taken off the market and returned to my possession. "You can stay as long as you need," he assured me, "or permanently if you want. I was planning to ask you to move in before all this happened anyway." His support was unwavering, but even he could not fully understand the psychological impact of what I had experienced. At the recommendation of Detective Rivera, I began seeing Dr. Elaine Mercer, a therapist specializing in trauma and betrayal. "What you are experiencing is complex trauma," Dr. Mercer explained during our first session. The betrayal by your parents has forced you to reevaluate not just your relationship with them, but your entire childhood and sense of identity. She was right. Every memory was now suspect, every childhood photo a potential lie. Had there been moments of genuine love mixed in with the manipulation, or had I imagined affection where there was only calculation? I keep thinking about Abigail, I told Dr. Mercer in another session. Did they love her? Did they do to her what they tried to do to me? Will I ever know the truth? The investigation into Abigail's death had been reopened based on the new evidence, but after nearly 25 years, conclusive proof was difficult to find. The detective handling that aspect of the case warned me that we might never know with certainty what had happened to my sister. Sometimes closure does not come from having all the answers, Dr. Mercer suggested. Sometimes it comes from accepting that some questions may remain unanswered and finding a way to move forward anyway. My parents' case proceeded through the legal system. They were held without bail due to the severity of the charges and the flight risk they presented. Each retained separate attorneys and continued to blame each other, a strategy that only strengthened the prosecution's case. I attended every court hearing sitting silently in the back. My parents never looked at me, never acknowledged my presence. It was as if I had actually died to them once I was no longer useful. The evidence against them was substantial. Beyond the recorded conversations at the hospital, investigators found emails discussing how to maximize my life insurance payout searches on their computer about identification of bodies after accidents and most damning text messages, exchanged minutes after they had identified the body. It is done. She is officially dead. Call the insurance company tomorrow, my father had written. Finally, our money troubles are over. No more ungrateful daughter to deal with either. Win-win, my mother had replied. When these messages were read aloud in court, several jurors visibly recoiled. I sat perfectly still past the point of being shocked by their callousness. Throughout this process, I had not forgotten about the unnamed woman buried in what was supposed to be my grave. Detective Rivera kept me updated on efforts to identify her. We think her name might have been Lucy Collins, she told me 4 months after the funeral. She matches the description of a homeless woman reported missing around that time. We are waiting on DNA confirmation from a possible relative in Arizona. The news gave me a strange sense of purpose. If Lucy had died because she happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, the least I could do was ensure she was properly memorialized. When the DNA test confirmed her identity, I contacted her only living relative, a cousin named Thomas, who had been searching for her for years. Lucy struggled with mental illness and addiction, he explained when we met. Our family tried to help, but she would disappear for months at a time. I never stopped looking for her, though. Together, we arranged for Lucy to be exhumed from my plot and given a proper burial under her own name. I covered all expenses and attended the small service, feeling a connection to this woman I had never met, but whose death had become intertwined with my life in such a profound way. Thank you for not letting her remain nameless, Thomas said, gripping my hand at the graveside. Most people would not have cared. I needed to know who she was, I replied honestly, for both our sakes. 6 months after my funeral, my parents went on trial. The evidence was overwhelming, and the jury took less than 4 hours to return guilty verdicts on all counts. My father received 18 years for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. My mother received 15 years for her role, which was deemed slightly less calculating in the murder attempt. I delivered a victim impact statement at their sentencing, facing them directly for the first time since the funeral. I used to wonder what I could do to make you love me. I said, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. Now I understand that your capacity for love was broken long before I was born. You saw children not as people to nurture, but as assets to exploit. You taught me that I only had value if I could provide something for you. It has taken losing everything, including my legal existence for a time, to realize that my worth was never dependent on your validation. Neither of them would meet my eyes. My father stared at the table in front of him. My mother gazed somewhere over my shoulder. Their last act of parental neglect, the final confirmation that I had never really existed to them as a person worthy of acknowledgement. I do not forgive you, I concluded, but I release myself from the burden of seeking your approval. You no longer have the power to determine my value. I do. As they were led away to begin their sentences, I felt no satisfaction, no sense of justice served. Instead, I felt a profound emptiness, where the hope for parental love had once resided, followed by an unexpected sensation of lightness, as if I had set down a heavy burden I had been carrying my entire life. Outside the courthouse, Michael waited with a bouquet of daisies, my favorite flowers. "How do you feel?" he asked as we walked to his car. I considered the question carefully, like I am finally free to figure out who Amelia Walker really is, without their voices in my head telling me I am not enough. He squeezed my hand. "I have always known who you are. Now you get to discover it too." That night, in the quiet of what was now our shared apartment, I opened my laptop and began typing. "My name is Amelia Walker. I died, but then I came back. This is my story of rebirth." 1 year has passed since I sat in that courtroom and severed the last emotional ties to the people who gave me life but never gave me love. The journey since then has been one of rediscovery and rebuilding, painful at times, but ultimately healing. The $500,000 insurance policy that my parents had been so eager to collect was eventually paid out not to them, but to me as the still living policyholder. After much consideration about what to do with money that had nearly cost me my life, I established the Abigail and Lucy Foundation, named for my sister, who never had a chance to grow up, and the woman who was buried in my place. The foundation serves two purposes: providing support for homeless individuals struggling with mental illness like Lucy Collins, and offering resources to children from emotionally abusive homes. We fund therapy programs, emergency housing, and educational opportunities. It feels right that the money my parents saw as their salvation is now helping people they would have considered worthless. "Your sister would be proud," Michael said when we received our official nonprofit status. Though I never knew Abigail, I like to think she would have grown up to be compassionate in spite of our parents, just as I eventually learned to be. My relationship with Michael deepened through the crucible of this experience. 6 months ago, on a quiet evening at home, he proposed with a simple sapphire ring. "I almost lost you once," he said. "I do not want to waste any more time." We were married in a small ceremony last month, surrounded by friends who had stood by me through the darkest period of my life. Cassandra was my maid of honor, and Rachel, the nurse who had helped me when I first discovered my parents' betrayal, was among our guests. Detective Rivera came too, bringing news that the investigation into Abigail's death had uncovered suspicious circumstances but insufficient evidence for charges. "The case remains open," she assured me. "We have not given up." I have accepted that I may never know the full truth about my sister, but I honor her memory by living with the authenticity she was denied. Her photograph sits on our mantle, a reminder of all that was lost and all that I am fighting to reclaim. Therapy with Dr. Mercer continues, though less frequently now. The nightmares have subsided, and I no longer flinch when someone mentions parents or family. We have been working on redefining those terms, recognizing that family is not always determined by blood. "You have created a chosen family, doctor," Mercer observed in a recent session. "People who value you for who you are, not what you can provide them." She is right. Between Michael, our close friends, and the community we have built through the foundation, I have found the unconditional acceptance I spent decades seeking from my parents. The psychological wounds have not completely healed, perhaps they never will. There are days when trust comes difficult, when I find myself questioning the motives of even those closest to me. Michael understands these moments, giving me space when I need it, and reassurance when I am ready to receive it. "Healing is not linear," Dr. Mercer reminds me often. "Some days will be harder than others, but the overall trajectory matters more than the temporary setbacks." My professional life has taken a new direction as well. I left the investment firm where I had been climbing the corporate ladder, realizing that much of my drive for financial success had been fueled by a desperate need to prove my worth to parents who could never be satisfied. Now I work part-time as a financial counselor for abuse survivors, helping them achieve independence from controlling relationships. The work is more meaningful than anything I did in my previous career. Sometimes I think about my parents sitting in separate prisons, perhaps reflecting on the choices that led them there. I wonder if they ever truly regret what they did, or if they only regret getting caught. I no longer need their remorse to move forward with my life. The most profound lesson I have learned through this ordeal is about the nature of value and worth. For 27 years, I believed my value was tied to what I could provide others, particularly my parents. I measured myself by their impossible standards and always found myself lacking. Now I understand that worth is inherent. It cannot be measured in dollars or achievements or the approval of others. Each of us matters simply because we exist, because we are here experiencing this complex, beautiful, sometimes painful human journey. The woman who walked into her own funeral a year ago was still seeking validation from people incapable of giving it. The woman I am today knows that the only validation that truly matters is the one that comes from within, from living authentically and compassionately. If you are watching this and find yourself trapped in relationships where your value is constantly questioned, where love seems conditional on what you can provide, please know that you deserve better. Family should be a source of support and acceptance, not manipulation and pain. And if your birth family cannot provide that, you have every right to create a chosen family who will. My name is Amelia Walker. I died on paper, but in reality, I finally began to live. The greatest revenge against those who never thought I was enough has been discovering that I always was, exactly as I am. If my story has touched you in any way, please share it with someone who might need to hear they are not alone. Leave a comment below about your own experiences with rebuilding trust after betrayal or steps you have taken to define your own worth apart from others' expectations. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of survival and transformation, and remember that even the deepest wounds can become sources of strength and wisdom. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage on your own path to authentic living.